Hello everyone, welcome back to Worlds Unwritten. My name is Jeriko. Today we are going to be continuing our deep dive into the different classes of the Player Core 2 Remaster, and fitting that I said investigate because today we are taking a look at the Investigator class. A fantastic, fun little intelligence-based class that's been around since the Advanced Player's Guide, and always felt a little strange to me. I really always loved the concept behind the class, but it always felt a bit strange in execution. A lot of times it never really seemed like a class that really fit in Pathfinder. It felt more like abilities that'd be really fitting in Call of Cthulhu, as it is a class that is focused on resolving mysteries, looking into the main plot of the campaign that's going on, but because of that, always also felt a lot weaker in situations like combat. So, let's take a look at what has been changed, what's been added, what's been removed, and whether Investigator looks to be in a better spot than it was before. And I'm going to come right out of the gate and just say it. New Investigator, with the slight changes and all of the new feats it's gotten, has me really, really excited. I'm actually now beginning to hope to see Investigators in my games moving forward, as I think they're going to have a lot of unique options and abilities that are going to make them a bit more versatile and just a different playstyle than some of the more classic classes. So let's dive right into it. Taking a look at the Investigator, their main ability is the Pursue a Lead action. Now, this has always been there. It is an exploration-based activity, but it has been reworded to make it make a bit more sense and a bit easier to keep track of, both from a player and GM perspective. So previously, if we take a look at what Pursue a Lead could do previously, you would need to examine a potential clue. And this took a minute to do. You could do it once per 10 minutes. And this always felt a little vague to me, but what you would effectively be doing is taking a look at something in your environment, like a footprint, something out of place, and designating a single creature, item, or location that would be the nature of your investigation. That would be the target of your Pursue a Lead. And really, you are only ever going to do this on creatures, since that is what you would get buffs against in combat. You would want to be prioritizing for that. If it was a non-combat focused part of the campaign, then you might use it on other things, but most of the time you're going to be prioritizing creatures for your investigation. Now, you didn't necessarily need to know a lot about it, but you did need to be aware of it. So you couldn't take just an undetected creature and pursue that as a lead. So it could be like a footprint, a hasty sketch, things like that would be what you would look at to determine your investigation. And this would let you target one specific creature to get buffs against. Those buffs would manifest in the form of a circumstance bonus to perception checks, as well as pretty much any mental-based skill check, so intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. This, as an ability, always felt really weird to manage. I didn't have much experience from the player's side, but as a GM who's had some investigators in my game before, most of the time it always sort of just felt like it was being played out that whenever the party learned about an enemy or a creature that they would be coming up against in the future, they would just set that as their investigation, and that was that. There wasn't really a lot of roleplay going into the ability, and it feels like it is an ability designed for roleplay. So how have they adjusted it? What they've changed is, instead of now choosing a specific creature or location, you're actually going to be designating what an overall mystery is. Your investigations, these are not just a lead that you're pursuing, but you are creating an active investigation. You are going to be designating a question at the heart of that investigation. And those questions will be things like the book gives examples. Where has the priceless work of art that was supposed to hang here been taken? Who or what killed this priest? If the party has been, the classic, they're invited to a dinner and the dinner is poisoned, who poisoned the dinner and why would be an active investigation mystery. Now, the process of starting your investigations remains about the same. You spend a minute examining a clue that you think might connect to a larger mystery. The great thing about this is you are inherently getting the abilities of the previous second level feat Red Herring, where after you spend a minute on it, the GM will let you know if there's actually a larger mystery you can pursue surrounding that, or if it's just sort of some erroneous information. Like if you guys are taking a look around an area and you find boot prints in the mud, you spend a minute investigating that, the GM might tell you, no, those are most likely just boot prints left by a merchant caravan, or just regular foot traffic in the area. There's probably not a larger mystery to be had around that. So it lets you designate a bit more and be a bit more, I don't know, I think I'm trying to use the term conscientious of what you are setting as your mysteries, and then instead of saying, like, this hag is my lead target now, you would be saying, my investigation is on who is kidnapping the children in this town. And from there, you then are going to get that same bonus, that +1 circumstance bonus to perception and certain skill checks against anyone that you are aware could be related to the mystery. And so I think that's going to open up dialogues for GMs a lot with their players in combat, where you're going, okay, what is the option here? Is there a realistic chance for me to believe that this creature is involved? I'll use a great example in one of my campaigns right now. The players are trapped in the abyss, the outer rifts, and they've been trying to figure out how to get home. So the investigator in that party, I'm imagining once we incorporate the remaster, will probably make one of their active investigations, how do we escape the outer rifts? And they met someone who was willing to help them, so I would likely give them the benefits on any diplomacy checks they're making against that NPC, requests make an impression, because they are aware at that point that person could help them get home. That person has requested that they find an iron crown. Well, that's perfect. They know where to look, they go there, and they find a royal basilisk wearing the royal crown. So I'd also then say they're going to get what will become the devise a stratagem benefit against that royal basilisk, because they know the crown belongs to the basilisk and they need that crown to escape, so that basilisk is definitely related to them getting free. The regular basilisks in that combat, though, they don't really have any direct connection to them escaping, so I would probably say they're not going to get the benefits against those creatures. I think it's really neat. The one thing I do want to recommend to GMs and players is to be really careful about how much time you're spending on deciding who and what you're getting the bonuses and penalties against. You really don't want to bog down the game and keep other players on the sideline while you discuss whether or not a player is aware of a creature being connected to their active mystery and wasting time because of that. So that's something really to keep in mind, but overall, with this update to Pursue a Lead, I'm really, really happy. The GM at this point will also then let you know at any point if you answer the question at the heart of your active mystery. So once my group manages to escape the outer rifts, I will directly let that player's character know, you have finished that investigation now. You can choose to close it, or you can keep it open if you think there might still be people or things related to it that you're going to want to get the bonus against. So, but they will know when a mystery has been solved and they don't need to keep it open anymore. Because I believe, if I recall, I'd have to find it again, but once you have locked onto something as a mystery, if you change that, or as an active investigation, if you change that investigation to a different target, you cannot pursue a lead into that investigation again until the next time you make your daily prep. So there will be a feat to help with that later, but if you choose to open up a new investigation when you've already got two, you gotta cancel one, and you won't be able to come back to it for a day. So if a player knows that an investigation is complete, they might feel a little bit more comfortable about that, and I really like that. The clue in reaction, this is a once per 10-minute ability that if someone else in your party is attempting a check that would allow you to get closer to solving your mystery, you can provide your pursue a lead bonus to them as well. This is pretty much the exact same as it worked pre-remaster, and I think is a nice little ability. I think that's one of those abilities that I feel like your players will oftentimes forget they have. It's sort of like an aid, but it is nice to remind them that they have it, and it's a nice little option for them to use if they don't really have any other reactions they want to use. And then the main combat ability of the Investigator is their Devise a Stratagem action. This is a single action once per round in combat with the Concentrate and Fortune traits, where you will roll a d20 in advance, and then that would effectively take the place of your next attack roll against the creature you targeted with Devise a Stratagem. The benefit of this being, if you were aware of that target being your Pursue a Lead target, you would make Devise a Stratagem a free action. Now, this was a nice ability because it also let you then add your intelligence instead of strength or dex to the attack roll as your modifier, as long as it was a agile or finesse melee weapon, unarmed attack, or a ranged weapon, or a sap, funny enough, if you're just using a club. I liked this, but from what I've seen, it did run into a bunch of niche cases where if your player rolls Devise a Stratagem and rolls a very low number, then they're not going to want to make an attack, since it is forced to replace their next attack roll against that target. They either then have to focus on another target or do something else with their actions, or just waste the attack on them. And I know that can definitely be a bit frustrating, especially if Devise a Stratagem wasn't a free action for you, since you were sitting there and going, well, now I've wasted one action, and I know I'm going to miss an attack if I make it, so what do I do with my actions instead? That has been resolved with what they've changed Devise a Stratagem with, and I could not be happier. All of that still exists, but Devise a Stratagem has been updated that after you roll your d20 targeting a creature, you get to choose whether you are going to do an attack stratagem or a skill stratagem. If you choose the attack stratagem, it all works the entire same, just your next attack roll against the targeted creature is going to use that d20 roll you just made, which will have a fortune effect and cannot be re-rolled. It'll also let you add your intelligence modifier to hit, all that jazz. If you choose a skill stratagem, though, that d20 you just rolled, thrown out the window. You will ignore that roll at this point, and you are restricted in that you cannot attempt a strike against the target until the start of your next turn. However, you will gain a +1 circumstance bonus to any intelligence, wisdom, or charisma-based skill checks or perception checks involving the target before the start of your next turn. This will also stack with your Pursue a Lead investigation bonus. Instead of gaining 2 separate +1 circumstance bonuses, it does specify that they will combine, increasing the Pursue a Lead bonus by 1 instead of gaining an additional +1. So that's really, really nice, and I think that's going to open up a lot of tactical options for investigators. After they roll a d20, if they know it's bad, they can choose a skill stratagem, which will make Bon Mots, Demoralizes, Evangelizes, any of those other sorts of abilities really, really effective, or at least even a little bit more effective against those targets. It also only prevents you from striking the target. So in my mind, I'm seeing that at this point, investigators are actually going to do pretty darn well by taking strength as a secondary option. If you do the attack stratagem, you can use intelligence instead of strength or dex, but if you have a high strength, then if you roll a poor attack stratagem, you can choose to skill stratagem and still do things like disarm, trip, shove, reposition, grab. Any of those won't have a penalty, even though they are an attack. So I think, in my mind, I'm seeing that intelligence primary and a secondary strength or charisma, but strength being a +2, maybe even +3 at level 1, will make for investigators having so many more tactical options in combat than it felt like they had previously. So I'm really, really excited. Getting this change to your combat benefit, it just opens up an investigator's options and doesn't make them feel pigeonholed into making a bad attack anymore. So I think this was a fantastic change. It's one of my favorites I've seen in the remaster so far. Well done to Paizo on this. And that's pretty much it. None of their proficiency increases are really changed as they level up. That all remains just about the same, and they were really solid anyways. So I don't see any particular issues with that. I don't think anything really needed to be changed. So let's hop into their methodologies. And a lot of their methodologies also are remaining pretty much the same. Empiricism and forensic medicine are both the exact same. Empiricism is the one that gets you an additional intelligence-based skill. That's odd as an investigator feat, and a free action that lets you recall knowledge, seek, or sense motive once per 10 minutes for free. Forensic medicine lets you use medicine, gain the forensic acumen and battle medicine feats, and heals additional hit points when you battle medicine. So I think forensic medicine, especially with some of the feats they're going to get into later, will also make investigators a really viable medic option in parties. Not necessarily a divine healer with like cleric or oracle or other divine or primal casters, but on a more medicine focused front, they're going to be really strong. And I do know there is the godless healing set of feats as well from, I believe, the Rahaduni region. Those could also be really, really good options, I think, for an investigator as well. So forensic medicine, I think, is really sort of a sleeper pick on what could be a really solid choice of an investigator and a really fun debuff while healing allies focused build for a character. So something I'm definitely excited to work on building myself. The alchemical sciences, alchemical sciences methodology has been slightly adjusted, but not really. It gives you crafting and alchemical crafting still, you get a formula book, all that jazz. However, this is more of a slight buff simply because of how Alchemist has been changed in the remaster. During your daily prep, you are getting actual versatile vials. Now, these are equal to your intelligence modifier, and you have quick tincture as an action, where you can use one as an action and make it into a different alchemical item that lasts until the end of the current turn. This is a slight buff, in my opinion at least, solely because versatile vials do not have to be quick tinctured into something else. They can be used as those little alchemical bombs that deal a bit of acid damage if you really want to with them. So they are going to give you a little bit of ranged damage capability and the option for that people might not expect. So simply by the fact that you are not forced into using them for quick tincture if you don't want to, I think makes them a bit interesting compared to how it worked previously. And finally, we've got the interrogation methodology. This is the one that got the biggest change, I suppose we could call it. It gives diplomacy, no cause for alarm, and you can pursue a lead at the same time you make an impression now, as long as you ask a question related to the creature with which you're conversing on, or a topic of your conversation. This is... yeah, I think this is basically... I don't think there's an issue with that wording, since pursue a lead now is opening an investigation. I know previously that would have basically being you can pursue a lead specifically on that character you're making an impression on for the most part. But now this could be really nice on when you are talking to someone, getting information from them, that can open up into a more active investigation. That's really nice for sort of turning a new plot for the party into your investigation really, really easily. As you're just getting that information and meeting this NPC, you can sort of automatically open it. The big buff to interrogation is their pointed question action. Now, if we take a look at what it did previously, that was a single action where you make a diplomacy check against a target's will DC. They're then immune for an hour. And what it does is it can force them to answer a question of yours on either a success or crit success. It doesn't have to be a truthful answer, but you will gain a bonus to your perception DC if they try to lie to you. A +4 on a crit success, a +2 on a success. Failure, they can refuse to answer. Critical failure, they can refuse to answer, and it forcefully decreases their attitude towards you by a step. Not a bad ability at all. Forcing a creature to answer one of your questions can be really, really nice, and I've been in a number of situations where I didn't necessarily want an NPC to give information, and because of pointed question, they were forced to, and the party was able to get some really helpful info on what they were currently doing or their enemies because of that. I always liked the ability. It's even better now, though, because it has a combat benefit. If you crit succeed or succeed against it, and whether the target answers truthfully or not, you glean something from their body language, and that target is off guard to any strikes you make using devise a stratagem against it before the end of your turn. So, a way to effectively make an enemy off guard to a devise a stratagem is really, really nice. I don't think this was necessarily needed for the interrogation's pointed question, but it does make it better. And so I'm really happy to see the change because what was previously just a good ability is now even better. So I'm really excited to see that. I do like that it has the restriction that it only works on a strike you make with your devise a stratagem. So it isn't just, oh, you know, if you crit succeed or succeed at this single action, not only are you getting information potentially, but you are forcing them off guard against all of your attacks for the turn. I do like that it has a little bit of a restriction there. So, interrogation, looking really good. I do still think forensic medicine might be my favorite for reasons we'll get into, but simply because I think it's going to make a really, really beneficial healer to the party on top of everything else that Investigator can do right now. So, I'm looking forward to seeing this, and let's go ahead and get into the feats for Investigator. Taking a look at their first options at level 1, we do have a new feat right off the bat called Eliminate Red Herrings. Now, this is kind of fun because there was the second level feat previously called Red Herring, which has now been baked into how Pursue a Lead works, and so it doesn't exist anymore. I do like that we are getting a feat with Red Herring in the name again, and I do like that they made it Eliminate so that you don't get confused looking between Pre-Master and Remaster. But Eliminate Red Herrings as a first level feat makes it that when you roll a crit fail on a skill check to recall knowledge related to a question about your active investigations, it is just a failure instead. So no way to get fake information. Really fits the name. A solid ability for your first level options. I don't think that is a bad choice to be taking at all. As a GM who loves to lie to my players when they roll critical failures on recall knowledges, being forced to, or being unable to lie to them makes me slightly sad, but I can also then see why it's such a good ability and why an Investigator would really enjoy taking it. So I like that new option. I think it's a solid choice. Taking a look at what else we've got, I believe Known Weakness gets a very slight wording update on it, making it that even if you choose the skill stratagem when you devise a stratagem, your allies will still gain the circumstance bonus to their next attack roll, which is just nice. Works and makes it still work with the new class and not penalized if you choose not to make an actual attack on an enemy now. I think that's a good update to it, and it's a good feat nonetheless. So, solid choice all around. I think first level Investigator, you've got a lot of good options that you can take, so I'm really excited to see what people are doing. Second level, this is where we got some fun stuff with it. The Athletic Strategist. Like I mentioned, I really think an Investigator taking a athletics-focused build with strength as sort of their secondary skill below intelligence is a really solid option, since if you don't decide to attack an enemy with an attack stratagem, you can still then do those actions. Athletic Strategist would make that idea even better, since you can use the attack stratagem's roll substitution for a disarm, grapple, reposition, shove, or trip, substituting the devise a stratagem roll for an athletics check instead, and letting you use intelligence for them. I like this. If you don't want to go into strength, I think this will still let you do those abilities, but I also don't think it's a bad idea if you are putting points into strength, since this will just make it even better if you're in a point where you don't really wish to deal damage, but you get a really good roll for your devise a stratagem. I think it's probably the best for if you roll like a 19 or a 20, and you can basically guarantee you're going to get a crit to disarm an enemy from there, since disarm does still require a crit to fully take an enemy's item out of their hands. I think that's really, really solid for effectively being able to know that you're going to guarantee the crit there. So really solid choice there. I'm excited for that. What else do we have? Let's see. Certain Stratagem. This is a nice feat. It acts sort of like the Confident Finisher for Swashbuckler, making it so that when you use your Devise a Stratagem attack stratagem, you're using intelligence for the attack, and you miss the target, you're still going to get to do half of your strategic strike damage to the target. So of the same type as your weapon or unarmed attack, and is a nice way to guarantee some damage. I don't think this feat is as good anymore, specifically because if you're getting a bad roll on your strategic strike or on your devise a stratagem, you aren't forced to make an attack against the enemy still. With that, you can effectively go, I think certain stratagem is really only going to be beneficial if the party doesn't really have an idea what the target's AC is at that point in time, and you get a sort of a middling roll where you're not sure if it's going to hit, you're not sure if it's going to miss, so you decide to go for it, it ends up missing, and you get a little damage off so it doesn't feel wasted. But I think in general, it's not necessarily a great choice for your second level feat, because I don't think it's going to come up very frequently for a lot of people if you are managing your attack and skill stratagems well. So, but we'll have to see. The Exploit Blunder reaction is a new one. Sorry, I should have said. A lot of new second level options. Athletic Strategist is not one of those, but Certain Stratagem and Exploit Blunder both are. Exploit Blunder is a reaction that if a creature you've devised a stratagem against on your most recent turn fails or crit fails a strike against you, it lets you step as a reaction. I really like that. It isn't just if they crit fail. If they just fail an attack on you, you can step, force them to then waste another action to move towards you if they wish to keep attacking you. So I think that is a really solid second level option, especially because at this point, unless you have a reaction from your ancestry or skills, your only other reaction is going to be Clue In, which might not be as effective in combat here unless you've got someone else in the party doing a lot of things like Bon Mow and Demoralize. So I think this is a really solid option for a different second level feat if you want them. You also have Person of Interest. That's going to be the last second level feat we go over here. This is our last new one. This is a single action once per 10 minutes, and this is effectively your previous pursue a lead way to get a benefit. You choose a creature that you can see who, to your knowledge, isn't tied to any of your active investigations, and for the next minute, you can devise a stratagem against that creature as a free action. It does not specify as if they were a part of your active investigation, so you're not going to get any of your other investigation bonuses against them, but it is a single action that will solely let you free action devise a stratagem against them. I think that's really nice, mostly beneficial if the party is going to be coming up against a mini-boss or boss-type enemy that isn't in any way connected to your investigations, that you know of at least. I'm a bit on the fence about that. I do think still, depending on the circumstances and if you're managing things well, the majority of time, the fights where you would want to use person of interest on an enemy, the enemy will likely in some way be connected to your investigation and you'll already get a free action. I see that for mostly dealing with some of the other sort of trash mob enemies or the enemies that are your level or one or two lower. And at that point, I'm not sure how often you're going to be devising a stratagem to focus on them. So this is a neat feat. I think I'm going to need to see it in play and test it a little bit to come to a full decision on just how good it is. But with your other second level options, especially with me being really interested in athletic strategist, exploit blunder, solid lead is still a really good feat. I'm not sure person of interest is sort of up top for a choice you should be making, but I think it is a solid choice to take nonetheless for investigator. That might be something you try out early in a campaign, and if it doesn't seem to be benefiting you very much, maybe you retrain into something else. So let's take a look at our 4th level feats. Nothing new, as far as I am aware, but the lie detector feat for empiricism and interrogation methodologies has gotten a slight buff, making it so very similar to the skill stratagem for devise a stratagem. If you would gain a pursue a lead bonus to any of the above checks from lie detector, it increases the bonus by 1 instead of just being another circumstance bonus that wouldn't stack. And that's just really nice, making that wording so these abilities are actually stacking now instead of potentially conflicting with each other is really, really solid and a good idea all around. The other option for 4th level that I'm really excited about is strategic assessment. That one's gotten a fantastic buff to it, so it now applies the first time you hit a creature with a strike, not just when you crit a creature with a strike. Still only applies the first time you hit a specific creature, and it's all of the same options of information: highest weakness, highest resistance, lowest saving throw, and immunity they have. But the fact that it specifically doesn't require a crit now and just makes it a hit, I think makes this a lot more viable as an option. Since previously it was a 4th level feat that gave you one little bit of information that you could potentially get on a recall knowledge only if you crit. This is now a solid way that, especially if you don't want to use recall knowledge at the start of combat, or you're going first, you've got the actions for it, and you're planning to hit, this will just give you a little bit of extra information and potentially save an action being used to recall knowledge by the party. So I think this is a just solid choice. One of the reasons I still like forensic medicine comes up here at 4th level as well, due to the scalpel's point. This is one that does require a crit when you devise a stratagem, attack stratagem, but it makes your enemy take 1d6 persistent bleed as long as you dealt piercing or slashing. So again, even if you're focusing on healing, you can take some really solid feats that are going to make your combat capacity pretty strong as well if you're going down that line. Just wanted to point that out. I don't think it's really been changed from pre-master, but it's just a feat I like. Taking a look at 6th level feats. Sorry, choked on water there. The thing I'm most excited for here is Connect the Dots. Previously, Connect the Dots was a bad feat. I don't really think I can say anything other than it wasn't really great. It was an exploration-focused activity where if you had 2 leads being pursued, you could try and find a way to connect them. And it never really felt good. And a lot of times, it sort of felt like you were trying to force connections that really might not oftentimes be there, or you would just forget you had it. It has now been completely reworked into an actual combat ability. It takes 2 actions to do. It's got the auditory, concentrate, and linguistic abilities, or traits, not abilities, and it lets you actually buff an enemy against, or an ally against a specific enemy at a time. So you'll target an ally and a non-allied creature. An enemy is just what I'm going to say for the terminology. You have to be able to see both of them. and you then make a perception check against the targeted enemy, either their deception DC or will DC, whichever is higher, and both the ally and enemy will then become immune for 10 minutes. So you're going to have to be really specific about who you're targeting, what ally you're giving a buff against a specific enemy at any given time, but I like that. Again, it's that tactical option that Investigator is really getting now. And what this does, if you crit succeed on this perception check, then your ally gains the Pursue a Lead Investigation bonus as a circumstance bonus to all strikes or skill checks against that creature until the start of your turn. If you succeed, same bonus, but they're only getting it on one strike or skill check against the enemy. If you fail to make a connection, and if you crit fail, you will become Stupefied 1 until the end of your next turn, which isn't even necessarily a bad effect on a crit fail, since you're really not a spellcaster. Yeah, it's still a penalty to any Wisdom, Charisma, Dex-based roll, but at least you're not dealing with the worst part of Stupefied, which is, worst part for you, a potential failed casting of a spell most of the time. So I don't think that's an awful penalty, especially just roll a good attack stratagem next turn. It's that simple. Don't bother with skill checks the following turn. But I do really like this. I think this is a really, really neat ability, and a way to give a circumstance bonus to an ally's strikes and skill checks is really solid for a 2-action ability. You're not necessarily going to be using it super frequently, especially since each enemy can only be targeted once and each ally can only be targeted once. So let's assume you're in an average party of 4. This can only be used 3 times in combat, and I also imagine you're probably not going to be using it every round, since it does take 2 actions to do, but it'll be nice if you're already up at an enemy or within range, there's someone you can free action, devise a stratagem against, you can connect the dots, and devise a stratagem to hit them, give a buff to an ally here, and still get your attack off for the round. I like it. I think it's fun. I'll definitely want to be seeing it in play. There's a part of me that almost feels like it would be fine as a single action ability, since it does make the targets immune for 10 minutes. It's really only usable once per ally and enemy in combat. I'm not necessarily sure if it needs to be a 2-action ability for just giving a +1 to +2 circumstance bonus, depending on your level, to your ally's strike and skill check. So, I think it's fine as is. I don't think I would hate it if it were 1 action. I don't think that would make it too strong. This is a 6th level feat, and your other options of Predictive Purchase and Thorough Research are both really strong. So, solid choice all around. I'm really happy to see it. I don't think it's just a wasted bad feat anymore. 8th level. You still got Blind Fight, you still got Clue Them All in, all good options. Defensive Stratagem is your new feat, and this is a new additional choice you can take instead of your attack or skill stratagem after rolling your d20 when you devise a stratagem. Instead, Defensive Stratagem will, like a skill stratagem, make it so you cannot strike the target until the start of your next turn, but it will give you a +1 circumstance bonus to all your defenses against effects caused by the target until the start of your next turn. And while I like how this ability sounds, that wording is really strange to me. Because my biggest question is a strike by the opponent an effect caused by them? I'm honestly not sure. I am a GM. I imagine I would give that circumstance bonus to my people, but the wording that exists just feels really, really awkward there, and I'm not really sure exactly what I'm supposed to do with it. So I think I would like to see Inazune Errata make that a bit better. You could just say a +1 circumstance bonus to all defenses against that target creature until the start of your next turn. I think that would be a fine wording and would be a bit easier to interpretate. But saying against effects caused by the target is just weird. That feels gross. Like, I read that and my brain immediately goes, okay, so it only, like, benefits saves and AC against magic and inherent abilities, maybe at best. I don't like how it's worded, so I'm going to rule it if someone takes it as just a bonus to all defenses against that target creature, but I do think it needs to be clarified by someone because right now it gives me an ick trying to read and understand it. I don't like it. Anyway, moving on from that, yeah, my notes are very long on that. I complained for a while when I was reading this the first time. Whodunit gets a very slight adjustment to it. It doesn't mess with the time it takes pursue a lead to get its benefits. If we take a look at what Whodunit did previously, it made it so that when you pursued a lead, you could spend 10 minutes instead of 1 minute to ask 2 questions. Now, specifically, it doesn't have that restriction because Pursue a Lead has been updated that you spend 1 minute investigating something, and if there is an active, a potential mystery you could set as an active mystery, you have to spend 10 minutes to set it that way anyways. So I think it's just fine getting rid of that. All the effects are still the same, and I think it's a really neat option and ability. I've always quite liked Whodunit as an ability, but it loses that restriction on time because that time restriction is just an inherent part of Pursue a Lead now. So no notes. I like it. Good ability. 10th level. Suspect of Opportunity has been reworked slightly. It now just allows you to use Person of Interest as a reaction when a creature makes a hostile action against you. And I think this is what makes Person of Interest actually decent of a choice, since previously, again, you weren't necessarily going to be, if you were managing your investigations well and your information, you might not necessarily be coming up against a bunch of major enemies that you would want to be devising a stratagem against as a free action. Letting you set that up as a reaction instead of having to use an action on your turn might make that a bit more of a juicy target. So Suspect of Opportunity, I like it. I like how it works. I'm still sort of not sure it's worth effectively 2 feats across your build to potentially be able to take a target and be able to free action devise a stratagem against that. I don't know. Again, I think that's something I need to see tested and in play, but it is a nice little thing. And 12th level. Oh boy, this is the big one. 12th level gets 5 new feats. 1 sort of general investigator feat and 4 feats, 1 for each of the different methodologies. And all of them are great. I really, really like these options, and it makes me want to get an investigator to 12th level just to make use of them. So, oh boy, let's get in. Let's go ahead and start with the general one. Yeah. Just as planned. This is a free action once per hour that makes it that you can have a fortune effect on your devise a stratagem d20 roll. Now, slightly confusing because this has the fortune trait, devise a stratagem has a fortune trait. You might think they don't mesh, but they are both modifying a different roll. Just as planned modifies the roll being made for devise a stratagem. Devise a stratagem's fortune effect modifies an actual attack roll. So it does still work. This is what will let you fortune your devise a stratagem and really potentially get a good roll and know you're going into a strike with that good roll. I like it. The once per hour effect I think is pretty solidly balanced. For the most part, that's once per combat, but maybe not quite as much. I also think that gives your investigator a good argument to the rest of the party of, hey, let's rest after this combat even longer, potentially, which can lead to more treat wounds being done or other actions that people need to do. You know, if we're already going to rest 30 minutes for someone to fully refocus, let's just rest another half hour. That'll get me this back and pretty much end the first person's treat wounds immunity, so we can do that again. And the part that one is like a little benefit that might pop up, I think, where people will be a little less recalcitrant on occasion to not heal up even more in the interest of time to push forward. I'm probably just talking out of my butt with that one, but neat little thought. So let's take a look at what these unique feats are. Empiricist's Eye is the first one. This is for the empiricism methodology, of course, and what it does is make it so that when you don't need to be heard to convey information, so when you use point out as an action, it loses the auditory trait. That's meh. It also makes it that when you point out a creature, that creature is off guard to your allies until the start of your next turn. A much better benefit. Point out as an action, I don't really ever see used. Part of that is simply because of how I rule it, that when you notice a creature with a seek action, I let you call it out for free to people. But point out is also only ever used for noticing undetected creatures. So I don't really see it used, and I'm not sure how good this feat is. If you're at a table where point out gets used really frequently, I think this is a fantastic choice. Otherwise, meh. It does have one additional benefit that makes it good, where if you took Blind Fight at 8, then your allies gain that feat's benefit against any creature that's off guard to Empiricist's Eye. So, again, I like the ability, I like what it can do, but just in my experience, point out is used so infrequently that I don't think you can really argue for taking that over something like Foresee Danger or Justice Planned or Reason Rapidly. So I think that one is probably my least favorite of the 12th level Investigator feats. It's not necessarily bad, but I think it's very, very niche. So if you can make some use out of it, please do so. I think it's a good option if you are getting that benefit. But next option, Make Them Sweat. This is your interrogation option and makes it so that when you succeed at using a pointed question on an enemy, the target will also become Frightened 1 or Frightened 2 on a crit. This makes emotion and fear added on, but it's still getting the other pointed question benefits. This is fantastic, especially now that your interrogation investigators are going to start using pointed question a lot more in combat. Getting a free Frighten on the enemy that isn't demoralize, so they can pointed question and then still demoralize them on a future turn to make them frightened for even longer in the fight. That is a fantastic feat. -1s to potential -2s on an enemy is always a really good thing, so I think Make 'em Sweat, if you're taking interrogation methodology, you absolutely take Make 'em Sweat as soon as possible. Perhaps you take something like Justice Planned later, but Make 'em Sweat, you gotta take it. It's just so good for that. Share Tincture is our alchemical sciences one. This is a single action that lets you use Quick Tincture for free and makes the item remain potent until the start of your next turn instead of the end of your current turn, making it effectively turn from a quick vial made with quick alchemy into an actual quick alchemied item that an alchemist would normally make. It also then interacts to pass the item to another creature as part of that action, and one of the fun things, you can pass it by throwing it, automatically succeeding at your ranged attack. That's a really nice benefit. If it were otherwise, I wouldn't really think it was all that great. But the fact that you can auto-succeed at a ranged attack to pass it to an ally is fantastic. I would typically assume something like one of these vials would probably have a range increment of only 10, maybe 20 if you're using just a bombs, like an alchemical bombs range increment, which actually you probably should. But that's still 70 to 140 feet you can throw it to someone, which is going to make your options for getting it to other people really, really strong. Instead of having to be next to them, you can throw from down range, and you do not have to care about your range increment penalty because it is an automatic success. I think that's what takes Share Tincture and actually make it really solid options for your characters. And I think Share Tincture and Alchemical Sciences is probably the route to go down if you are planning on making a ranged focused investigator. Someone who uses a bow or a crossbow, something like that. I think you add, or even a gun. I think you go alchemical sciences because Share Tincture will let you take one of those items, whether it's an elixir of life, another elixir, a mutagen, and toss it to any ally for free from that range you're going to be sitting back at. That's really nice. And last but not least, what made me fall in love with the forensic medicine methodology, surgical shock. This is a single action. It does have the attack trait to keep in mind, but you make a medicine check against a target's fortitude DC if they're within your reach. If you crit succeed, they are either clumsy 3 or stupefied 3 until the end of your next turn. They're then immune for an hour. If you succeed, they're either clumsy 2 or stupefied 2. And if you fail, you still gain a +1 circumstance bonus to the next attack action you attempt against them before the end of your turn. Critical failure doesn't do anything, they're unaffected, and it would trigger a reaction as if you had used a manipulate action, so you might get reactive striked, but at that point there's also not even really a chance of anything getting disrupted if they crit succeed that, because the action's already gone through. I think this is really fantastic. Either clumsy 3 or stupefied 3 on a crit success, and even value of 2 on those is really solid against an enemy. Either -2 to -3 against AC, or reduce the chance of them successfully casting a spell by 10 to 15% for a single attack action is absolutely huge. And again, this isn't a strike, so you can still devise a stratagem, roll a bad a bad attack with that, and still use surgical shock. It does have the attack trait, so it'll apply to your map, but it's not a strike, so you can absolutely use it. I'm in love with this feat. I think it's a really, really phenomenal option for forensic methodology. It does require you to be in melee reach, but I think a lot of investigators are pseudo-melee anyways with how they play, so I like it. That is potentially one of my favorite feats I've seen come out, if not just with Investigator, but with the remaster up until this point. Now, that is the end of the 12th level feats, but that's also going to be where we end. For the most part, 14th to 20th level Investigator has practically no changes. No new feats, no changes, well, aside from one that we'll get into here, and the slight addendum to that. No removed feats, it is exactly the same. And I'm really disappointed in that. I think the developers for Investigator were on such an amazing streak from how they reworked the base abilities all the way up through 12th level feats, and then it just feels like they gave up. There's nothing different. And don't get me wrong, the higher level feats for Investigator are nutty. I really like pretty much all of them, but just the fact that there's nothing new, there's nothing really changed, it doesn't feel good. It feels a little unfinished. And it takes that massive excitement I had for everything up to that and just sort of just dampens it really hard. And I am going to have to take that into account for my overall opinion of the remaster. But let's get into the last little change or two I want to go over. At 18th level, Lead Investigator, which requires Clue Them All In as a prerequisite, does have a very slight change to its wording. Basically nothing, but if we take a look at how it previously read, the first line of it said you spend 1 minute briefing up to 4 allies about one lead you're pursuing, and you'll then give them the benefit. Now it reads you spend 1 minute briefing up to 4 allies about one of your open investigations. So at the very least, I know they didn't just copy and paste that feat, because they did change its terminology to be more in line with your pursue a lead. That then leads me to the question of the 20th level feat, Everyone's a Suspect. That one didn't have any wording change, and because of that, it now feels really weird. So the feat makes it so that after interacting with a creature for at least a minute, you automatically pursue a lead with that creature as a subject. And you can have any number of such leads at any given time, when you pursue a lead again, you don't give up any of these automatic subjects. That made a lot of sense with previous pursue a lead because you would set specific targets as your pursue a lead. But pursue a lead now is all about opening an investigation, having a driving question, and everyone's a suspect. I know mechanically it is what it's effectively saying is you can free action pursue or devise a stratagem against everyone as long as you have spent at least 1 minute interacting with them. But the flavor of it doesn't coincide with the updated terminology of pursue a lead at all. And that one really just feels like it was copied and pasted from Premaster with no one looking at it and going, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you read it in new context. And I am disappointed by that. I think the feat can still be made to work without any issue, but I do think the wording needs to be changed on it. It is a 20th level feat. You're probably not going to see it super often, but I think that does sort of go in my folder of feats I think the devs were too lazy to do any proofreading on. And I've seen a couple so far. I know there are a few more, both feats and features, as we progress further in to the other classes. And I think that's a shame. I know that there is quality control in Pi, so there has to be for their stuff. I also am 99% certain it's not just one writer doing these things. And that sort of falls in line with some of my other issues I've had and issues I'll get to. Shout out to Oracle, that it feels like there are times that no one just stands up and goes, hey, do you really think this is, how do any of you actually think this is a good thing? How does this make sense to everyone? And I'm going off on a slight tangent here, let's bring it back, but I do just think that has a slight issue. And I would love to see the wording updated, even if it is mechanically going to act the same. I think just a wording update to bring it in line would not be out of place. So, overall, Investigator, really, really happy with everything it got. It got a bunch of new feats, some small rewords. Its base abilities got buffed and changed to work really well. And I'm ecstatic. Investigator has gone from one of my least, I don't want to say least favorite, but class I was least interested in, simply because pursue a lead felt just vague enough that I always felt it would be more hassle to work on that with the GM than anything else, to a class I really want to try out for multiple different builds. And interrogation, alchemical sciences, doing a ranged build, making a melee healer with forensic medicine who does a lot of debuffing. I've got at least 3 ideas just off rip after doing this that I'm really excited to hop in and build. So I think Investigator, I feel like I have to give it an 8.59 out of 10 for everything they did, but I also don't think I can forgive just the laziness it felt when I got to the end of 12th level, that the first time I read through this book, I had so much excitement reading through all the 12th level feats. Everything was new pretty much, and it was all good, aside from Empiricist's Eye, but we don't talk about that. And so I was excited to see what else. You've got such great abilities just past the halfway point. What else are we going to get as we get to the even higher levels of this class? And it was nothing. They took the biggest high I've had in the book so far, aside from maybe just Alchemist, reading through all of that. They took what was so many wins they had, such an amazing, amazing run and build-up, and put it at the edge of a cliff. They just killed the excitement harder than I think anything has killed my excitement in Pathfinder to date. And while there's nothing objectively bad, because the feats that exist in those options are all pretty damn great and will fit into builds no matter what. If anything, I'm most upset that I don't have really anything to talk about with them because they're the exact same. You could go look at the Advanced Player's Guide and just look at the 14th to 20th level feats, and that's what's in the remaster. It's just disappointing, and I think that's where I want to end this video on. It is a class that took me to the moon in excitement and change and interest in the class, and then killed it, and took something that looked phenomenal and killed any and all excitement that I had for it. I'm still excited. I still want to build investigators, but I'm just disappointed in the devs. And we're going to see more of that disappointment later. Anyway, let's get off that melancholic note, get back to being a bit more energetic and fun. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Again, as always, if you've stuck with me this far into the video, either just listening or actually paying attention, I don't particularly care. I'm just glad you found it, that you stopped by and decided to be a part of my rambling for a bit of time. So thank you. Really and truly, I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, basic YouTube shit, like, subscribe, whatever. Love to see the channel grow. The big thing I do want to mention is if you have any real thoughts on this, on what we talked about, what's new, what's changed, what didn't get anything new, I'm still salty if you can't tell, throw a comment down. Talk about it. Say something. I would really, really love to hear your insights into the class as well and your thoughts on things. If Investigator is a class that you've previously tried, what you like or dislike about the change, and if you haven't tried it before, if these updates have made it something you want to try in the future like me. But that all being said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you guys are wondering why this is a bit late, for those of you who don't know, I do run games professionally. Friday, Saturday, Sundays are my biggest days. I run 2 games a day each of those days, so I don't really do much else aside from just work on writing and running games those days. But we'll get back into the regular schedule with a daily upload on these classes until we finish them all. And from there, also, if you're still listening, let me know. Do you want me to do ancestries and backgrounds? Do you want me to do archetypes? Do you want me to talk about the new spells? Any of the new treasure? We've got so much in Player Core 2, and I am happy to keep talking about my thoughts on everything as long as you all want to keep listening. So I do have an idea for what we're going to do starting soon, probably once we finish the classes deep dives as well, for a way to really start taking a look on actual character builds we can do with the new content, both in Player Core 1, Howl of the Wild, Player Core 2, all that new stuff. So stick around if you've got any interest in character builds and potentially even making it competitive in any meaningful way. So I'll stop rambling here. I'll give you the rest of your day back. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with the monk video. Have a good one.